In this video we are going to review Westlaw Next. To do so we're going to use this hypothetical. A police officer in Toledo, Ohio pulled over Barry for running a red light. During the stop the officer saw the barrel of a shotgun sticking out from underneath a hoodie jacket on the rear seat. Thus the officer arrested Barry for possession of a concealed weapon. Here's our issue. Does Barry have a defense to the charge because the weapon was not fully hidden? Well, let's go to Westlaw. Here's your Westlaw homepage. You will want to ignore this search bar for now because if you search here, you are going to search absolutely everything in the Westlaw database. Instead, come down here to these content tabs. Since we know the jurisdiction is Ohio, we can go right into the state materials and go into Ohio. So now it's as if we've entered the Ohio room of the law library. The content is divided, or the Ohio database is divided into content such as cases, statutes, and secondary sources. If you remember, a secondary source is a great place to start, and in particular, a jurisprudence is a really good place to start. So we're going to go into Ohio jurisprudence. Now, we could do a search here and search Ohio jurisprudence, or what I suggest is to use the index. That is exactly what you would do if you are looking at the hard copies of Ohio jurisprudence. You would go to the index, and we can do the same here. So let's open the index. And then we're going to do Control F, and we're going to search for weapon. And the first reference is carrying weapons. Let's see if there are any others. Deadly weapon or weapons and firearms. I'm going to look there first. So I'm going to open up weapons and firearms. In particular, with respect to weapons, we're looking at concealed. So we could do another Control F, or I could just scroll down to conceal. I do see carrying, and here's concealed under carrying. And it gives me different places to go in Ohio jurisprudence to read about concealed weapons. So which one of these do I select? Well, I could just go with the first one. So now I'm in the actual text of Ohio jurisprudence. This actually is volume 29C of Ohio jurisprudence, which is Criminal Law, Substantive Principles and Offenses, section 1513. The title of this section is Municipal Regulation, so I can tell right away this is not relevant to my issue. But do not come back up here and search, because now I'm going to be leaving Ohio and I'm going to be searching everything again. So use your table of contents. So here's my table of contents for criminal law. And in particular, it tells me I'm in the topic of weapon offenses. And if I scroll down a little bit more, I'm right here in section 1513. So I should look around 1513. I should look before and after. I'm not seeing anything about concealed weapons. Not to worry yet. Let's go back up. It says I'm in the general categories, so there's probably more here. I'm going to close this just by clicking on it. And yes, there's another category, particular offenses. Let's open that up by clicking on it. And now we have this topic of carrying weapons, concealed weapons. That's more like it. So I'm going to open it up. Carrying concealed weapons in general. That's always a good place to start. So I was at 1513. Now I'm at 1516 through 1524, and I haven't even used that search bar. So let's scroll through here. What do we have? What constitutes concealment might be a good one, and also in motor vehicles. Now, just so you know, you probably will have to read more than one section to get the get the whole picture of your research issue. But we're going to start with 1521. And if I look here, it talks about concealment when only 1/3 of a rifle was visible. And hover over the number 1, it tells me that point came from State v. Suber. Okay? I could also read these other entries as well. But as I'm going to make note of that State v. Suber case, but I also wanted to look at what constitutes concealment, which is 1520, the section previous. So I could click on 1520, or I could use these toggle buttons up here. This will take me to the next section, or this would take me to the previous section. I'm just going to use this. So this takes me to 1520, and now I can read about what constitutes concealment. And in this paragraph, you'll see the very same thing is discussed, about 1/3 of a rifle under the front seat. And if I hover over this, there's that State v. Suber case again. So this secondary source has pointed us to primary law, in particular State v. Suber. I would not cite or quote the Ohio jurisprudence. Rather, I use it to get me to primary law. And that's what we're going to do next. All we have to do is click on it, and now it takes me to that case. So I want to just show you real briefly what you have here. You have the citation at the top. You also have the parallel reporter citation right here. I'm sorry, the parallel regional reporter citation. You have the name. You have the date. Also the synopsis, which is a brief overview of the case and also will tell us what the disposition was. And headnotes. These are the points of law that are discussed in the case, and there's 10 of them for this particular case. You cannot cite to or quote from the synopsis or the headnotes because they're not part of the decision. They're helpful tools, but they're not the law themselves. So let's read through these headnotes to see if any of these are applicable, and you would note that the first one is. So let's click on it, and now it takes us to that part of the decision. And it says a deadly weapon does not need to be entirely hidden from view in order to be considered concealed for purposes of the statute. So now this case has pointed us to another piece of primary law, a statute. In fact, the statute would serve as our main rule. We should read through the rest of the case to confirm that, in fact, the court did rule in favor of the state in this situation, and in fact, that's what happened. So the next thing we need to do is make sure that this case is good law. How do we do that? Is we use key cite. I'm going to scroll back to the top of the case. Key cite is all at the top here. That's what these tabs are. So this tells us if there's any filings available for the case. There are not. Or if there's any negative treatment for the case, and there is not. Is there any subsequent history of the case? In other words, has this case been appealed? It was not. Tells us 0. But there are 20 references to it. When I hover over it, it tells me there are 10 subsequent cases that have cited to it and 6 secondary sources. All I have to do is click on it, and now it'll tell me what secondary sources cite to the Suber case. So this is a great way to find additional cases by looking at another secondary source. I'm going to go back to cases, because even though we know that this is good law because we don't have a yellow or a red symbol out here, maybe we could find a case that's even either more on point or that's more recent, and we would be able to do that by clicking on the cases here. So now this lists out all 10. Not very many cases to deal with, but if we had a lot of cases, we could narrow those cases. For example, we could narrow by jurisdiction by just selecting Ohio. In this situation, that's not a big deal because there's only one non-Ohio case. But if we did that, we need to hit apply filters, and then it would take away the Missouri case. Also, we can narrow by headnote topic. If you remember, the headnote we were looking at was headnote 1 dealing with weapon. If I don't remember the headnotes, I can just click on specify, and it tells me that this in fact is the headnote dealing with concealment. So I want to select headnote weapons. So now I need to come up and apply filters, and it will now narrow those 10 cases down. In fact, it narrowed it all the way down to 1. I can enter that case. Now to find out where in that case our Suber case is discussed, I just hit search term and it takes us to that. So how, though, would you know if a case is potentially no longer good law? I'm going to go back to Suber, and I'm going to show you this table of authorities. This table of authorities lists every case that Suber cites to. And look over here. This gives us a flag, so I'm going to open this Donnelly case up. So up here with the key site, Donnelly gives us a big yellow flag. So what does that mean? It tells me there's some negative treatment associated with this Donnelly case. In fact, it tells me right here that this case has distinguished in some way Donnelly. We don't know how, so we would have to go into this case and read to see how in fact it does distinguish Donnelly, because the distinction may not matter for our case, and so we could still use it. You also notice that there's actually 26 cases that have some negative treatment on Donnelly. So how do I know what those cases are? I just click on that tab, and those 26 cases now are listed. Now let me show you a case that has a red flag. This is the Clifford case. So I'm going to open up Clifford. Alright, so if you had found Clifford and opened it up for the first time, you would see this red flag and it says severe negative treatment. But what does that mean? Well, if we look here, it tells us it was there's been some overruling with respect to the case, and that was recognized by this opinion. I still don't really know what that means, so I'd have to open up this Slaughter case to see what in fact it says about Clifford. There's also more cases that are that have given it negative treatment, 37 in total, one of which would include Slaughter. How do I figure that out? I open up the negative treatment tab, and now it gives me all the cases that have given Clifford negative treatment, and it pulls up Slaughter as the most negative. So that would be the case I would want to start with to review. So that's how you navigate through KeyCite. That's also how you navigate through Westlaw, especially when you are using a secondary source. And you can see I didn't even use the search bar. I will show you one thing though. I'm going to go back to Ohio. I could have used the search bar when I was in Ohio jurisprudence. I'm going to do conceal, the root of conceal with an exclamation point, because then I'll get everything after conceal, such as concealment and concealed, and then within 10 of weapon. When you use the search bar, though, ignore that word wheel that pops up. And this gives us 68 hits. Some of these, as we scroll through, you would see are like section 1520. That was a really good one that we found. So some of these are applicable, some maybe not. but you would have to navigate through 68. I hope this was helpful. Good luck.